Many who have opposed President Trump's use of tariffs to try to level the playing field for American businesses, they were cheering today after the Supreme Court decided to block the use of certain types of tariffs from President Trump's economic arsenal. Well, according to President Trump and several in his administration, they haven't really blocked a whole lot. As a matter of fact, they've just made it more clear how President Trump and his administration will be able to use tariffs. Then you've got Zohran Mamdani, who I don't know how he was able to do it, but in less than 2 months, he has become maybe the least popular politician in New York City history. And that's saying a lot. If you know anything about New York City politicians, to hit rock bottom after less than 2 months, wow. Talk about an accomplishment. Kudos to Zohran Mamdani for being that awful. We'll be talking about that and more, including an interview with the great Ira Bershatsky on today's episode of The J.D. Rucker Show. Yeah, so the Supreme Court shot down some of President Trump's tariffs today in a 6-3 decision that included, of course, we knew the four leftists, well, the three leftists plus John Roberts, who usually votes with the leftists. But they also got Coney Barrett and Gorsuch to side with them. So it was a 6-3 ruling against President Trump and his tariffs. It sucks, especially considering that kudos to Neil Kavanaugh for joining the originalists, of course, Justices Thomas and Alito. But it was unfortunate that we had to see this just from a PR perspective. Thankfully, President Trump came out and he was prepared for it, and most of us were. Anybody who's been paying attention, reading the tea leaves, they were listening to the questions that were being asked, listening to the responses from the justices when they were talking about tariffs last month. Was it last month or the month before? I think it was last month. And it seemed pretty clear that they were going to. I knew that Amy Coney Barrett was going to go side with them. The question was, which would have been enough already, but the only question was whether or not they would also get Gorsuch, and his quote-unquote swing vote went to the left. With that said, not all is lost. As a matter of fact, according to President Trump, we might be in better shape now from a tariff position than we were before, because they did, as a result of shutting down the tariffs, they did inadvertently open the door for other aspects of his trade relationship powers to be more solidified and clear. And now he just has to find other ways to impose his tariffs, which they were ready for it. It seems as if they were expecting it just like we were. Watch.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you. The Democrats on the court are thrilled, but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're an automatic no, no matter how good a case you have. It's a no. But you can't knock their loyalty. It's one thing you can do with some of our people. Others think they're being politically correct, which has happened before far too often with certain members of this court, and it's happened so often with this court. What a shame. Having to do with voting in particular, when in fact they're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats, and not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. It's a small movement. I won by millions of votes. We won in a landslide. With all the cheating that went on, there was a lot of it, but we still won in a landslide. Too big to rig. But these people are obnoxious, ignorant, and loud. They're very loud. And I think certain justices are afraid of that. They don't want to do the right thing. They're afraid of it.
Good stuff there. Good stuff there. Let's go to the article about this over at Breitbart.com. Trump imposes 10% global tariff after Supreme Court struck down emergency powers tariffs. President Donald Trump announced he is imposing a 10% global tariff on top of tariffs already in place after the Supreme Court struck down his duties imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, AIPA. Trump's announcement came during a press conference the White House scheduled on short notice. That doesn't mean that they weren't prepared. It just means they didn't know when the decision would come down. It did come down, and then they launched. The notice after the 6-3 ruling against the IEEPA tariffs, in which Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Neil Gorsuch, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberal judges to rule against the president, and we already played that video. The 10% global tariff Trump is imposing on Friday is not under IEEPA, but under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which, to his credit again, Justice Brett Kavanaugh emphasized as another vehicle for imposing tariffs in his dissenting opinion. Effective immediately, all tariffs, you heard what he said. Said some good stuff there. Section 122 empowers the president to address large and serious balance of payment deficits through import surcharges of up to 15%. So he didn't even use his full power there. He went with 10%. Along with the Section 122, Kavanaugh pointed to Sections 201 and 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, as well as Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930 as pathways for future tariffs. In other words, Kavanaugh didn't just vote as part of the dissenting side against stopping the tariffs. He said, hey, it's wrong. We're going to lose this one. But guess what? Here are other ways that you can still get around it. In other words, he helped out quite a bit. Now, would the administration have needed that help? Probably not. But it sure is a good sign to hear it from a Supreme Court justice, because once the president starts imposing these other tariffs, you can guarantee there will be lawsuits already prepared to say, nope, he can't do that. Nope, he can't do that. And you can guarantee there's going to be some woke activist judges out there that are going to say, nope, you're right. He can't do that. And some of those may head up to the Supreme Court by offering his dissenting view and by highlighting specific ways that President Trump will be able to impose his tariffs. He's basically signaling to not just the world, but more importantly to the rest of the Supreme Court that, hey, this is a pathway that works. This is legal. This is constitutional. And here's how he will do it. Trump also expressed that he is ashamed of certain members of the court, and of course, two of the three that he brought to the court ruled against him, which is unfortunate. But he wasn't alone. You also had, he being President Trump and Neil Gorsuch, they weren't alone. You also had Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent sounding off after the ruling, and he says that the court did not strike down Trump tariffs. He vows administration will invoke alternative legal powers to keep America's first trade agenda alive. Hopefully alive and well and even in better shape. That's what we would love to see. According to the article over at the Gateway Pundit, the radical left, globalist elites, and their sycophants in the mainstream media thought they had finally scored a fatal blow against President Donald Trump's historic America First economic agenda, following a highly publicized, you know all that. They were wrong. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just stepped up to the podium at the Economic Club of Dallas to completely vaporize their narrative. Let's see if we've got that. Yeah, here we go.
I would also like to take a moment to address today's Supreme Court ruling, and I would note that I did not change a single word in my speech post the ruling. President Trump will always put our national security and Americans first. And as I have said before, the president has multiple tools in his toolbox. Let's be clear about what today's ruling was and what it wasn't. Despite the misplaced gloating from Democrats, ill-informed media outlets, and the very people who gutted our industrial base, the court did not rule against President Trump's tariffs. 6 justices simply ruled that IEEPA authorities cannot be used to raise even $1 of revenue. This administration will invoke alternative legal authorities to replace the IEEPA tariffs. We will be leveraging Section 232 and Section 301 tariff authorities that have been validated through thousands of legal challenges. Treasury's estimates show that the use of Section 122 authority, combined with potentially enhanced Section 232 and Section 301 tariffs, will result in virtually unchanged tariff revenue in 2026.
All right, so what does all that mean? And the real question is, if this is so easy, why didn't they just start using these other versions of tariffs? Now, the answer to the first question, what does it mean? Notice that he said that the tariff revenues will be untouched. There will be changes to the tariffs. There will be numbers moving up and down. Some tariffs that are available now will not be available in the future, and other tariffs that haven't been used yet will be used. That's the basic premise of what he's saying. But to answer the second question, we have to make a very, I think, not necessarily bold, but a speculative assumption here. And that assumption is they knew going in, probably before he was even inaugurated, that the Supreme Court was likely to shoot this down. If that's the case, why would they go down this road? And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is if you know that you've got 2 or 3 or 4 different avenues through which you can go, you don't necessarily start with the first one, the easiest one, so to speak. Because if that one does get shot down, then you don't have a very good place to go. Whereas in this scenario, we've had these tariffs in place for a long time. Now that they're getting reversed, it should be easy to replace them. I think that they knew going in that this is the likely outcome, and they were prepared to basically swap them out. Okay, put in different tariffs under different authority, and those tariffs will have a stronger chance of succeeding, especially after the first ones got shot down. In other words, it's almost like a concession. Okay, fine, Supreme Court needs to shoot something down. Let's give them something to shoot down, and then in preparation for having something that they then won't shoot down. Sort of the I don't know, sacrificial tariff lamb that's thrown out first, right? Well, again, not based upon any knowledge of, nobody's said any of this, but my speculation is that that's what the strategy was, is, and will continue to be. And if that's the case, then it's a great strategy. There is another component. There does need to be certain not loopholes, certain hoops they have to jump through in order to impose the tariffs in these new fashions. And I don't know specifically what those are. I'm not an expert on tariffs or tariff law, but from what I'm hearing, this was basically the IEEP A was specifically designed to be the easy button. It's okay, cool. Emergency done, poop, poop, poop. But with the understanding that was a temporary fix to the bigger problem. Now we'll get the more permanent fix, and we'll see if that plays out. I think that it will. I hope that it will, because we really we need the money. I'm very hopeful that I've made it crystal clear over the months, over the years, that I am not a fan of pharmaceuticals. With that said, I do understand and I appreciate there are times when we need access to certain drugs. Maybe you have a chronic ailment and you haven't been able to find a natural solution to treat or even cure your ailment. What about antibiotics? Am I against antibiotics? No. Praise God, I haven't had to use any for a very long time. We were trying to figure it out. We were able to trace it back. I think it's 2011, the last time I had to take an antibiotic of any sort. So yeah, awesome. Praise God for that. There are those that like to use antibacterial, not sorry, what are they called? Antiparasitics, right? Like ivermectin. And look, I got no problem with that. I actually would encourage those who want to take ivermectin for various reasons, do so. I'm more against big pharma's control over American lifestyles. That's what I'm really fully against. I'm not saying don't ever take medicines. Every single one of them is bad, right? I don't take many, but then again, I do have members of my family who do take them, who take them on a daily basis. But what happens if you can't get the meds that you need? What happens if the supply chain breaks down, if there's war in Taiwan and we get involved and China cuts off our pharmaceutical ingredients? There are a lot of things that could happen. And that's why I am very, very blessed to be partnered with my good friends over at Jace Medical. You can go to patriot.tv/meds, patriot.tv/meds, and you can stock up on all kinds of pharmaceuticals. That way you're not beholden to big pharma, big government. I love dogs. That's the declaration that a lot of people, a lot of Americans are making, especially after Zohran Mamdani and his Islamic political movement in New York City has come down on dogs, or at least hinted at it. They're calling it a test balloon for Sharia. And there's been a lot of people that are up in arms about this. Randy Fine came out and got into trouble, got all sorts of Democrats apoplectic over the notion that he would rather have a dog than a Muslim. I don't recall the exact quote, but it was kind of, it was aggressive. But the sentiment is understandable because that's the choice that apparently they're trying to force us to make. It makes no sense to me, but unless you take it from the strategic perspective of, again, a test balloon for Sharia. If they can just get us to accept something minor, at least in their eyes, something minor such as indoor dogs are a bad thing and dogs shouldn't be walking around New York City or whatever the play is. Well, dog owners and just people who love freedom are trying to do something about it today. I would say it's a nice attempt. I wish that the actions were perhaps a little bit more political, more direct. But you know what? People love dogs. I love dogs. So let's look at it. This story comes to us from Red State. Wag the Night Away. That's the name of the event in Times Square as New Yorkers are in your face to Mamdani's anti-dog stances. This is from Oliver O'Connell over there at Red State. On the first Friday of Ramadan, while practicing Muslims will be performing the Tarawih prayer in the center of Times Square, New York dog owners and lovers, you shouldn't be a dog owner if you're not a lover, by the way, but it's just a whole other discussion. They plan to also take over Times Square for a potty of epic proportions. The Times Square Dog Lovers Gathering will be hosted, it was hosted, today, from 5 p.m. Eastern until 9 p.m. and promoted as a sea of pause and positivity. And if you are watching the video version of this, you'll see there's a nice, beautiful golden retriever in Times Square. I'm not going to play it, though. I'm sure it's something crazy. To recoin an 80s-ism, New Yorkers are telling Democrat Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani to talk to the paw. Funny, funny, funny. Funny stuff. This is absolutely glorious between the call to prayer that is being blasted around New Yorkistan and Muslims once again choosing Times Square, the internationally recognized symbol of New York, instead of their mosques for their prayer display. The Islamic radicals have publicly planted a flag and claimed territory. So, New Yorkers of all stripes are using this event to declare they are taking it back. War rarely ever starts with bullets and bombs. It starts with these smaller acts of gaining and ceding ground. Who would have thought it would be the dogs who would be the ones to give New Yorkers a wake-up call, a much needed, very deserved wake-up call. As Red State reported, this was set off when a Palestinian activist and close ally to Mayor Mamdani decided to make a declaration that New York was, quote, coming to Islam, claiming that dogs are, quote-unquote, unclean and that they should not be allowed in homes. And that was Nardine Kizwani, the pro-Palestine jihadist terror-supporting activist. Oh, yeah. Suffice it to say, it did not go well. There's some stuff. Of course, there was the whole Randy Fine incident that we discussed. And here's what they're saying. This is Funky Town saying this is a test case. It is laying the groundwork for the other Sharia laws being advanced. Where will Muslim demands end? We'll keep our dogs, beer, and bacon, and if Muslims don't like it, they can leave. Or they can just mind their own business. Look, I want to be clear. I'm not like anti-Muslim. It's like, oh, there's a lot of people out there. We need to deport all Muslims. Look, there's a lot of Muslims that were born in the United States of America. They're American citizens. We still have freedom of religion. If they want to practice their religion, that's great. Just don't try to impose it. Don't ever try to impose it through the legal system. Don't try to win these elections and suddenly, make New York City outlaw dogs because of Sharia law. That is un-American. That is illegal. That's against the Constitution of the United States. I think a lot of times people think that just because I am a Christian nationalist, that means that I want the United States of America to be only Christian. That's not the case. I mean, I would love for that to happen, but not through force, not through decree, not through a theocracy. I want as many Americans and as many people across the world to embrace Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. Of course I want that. But trying to force it, trying to impose it, I'm against that. And I'm against that from a Christian perspective, and I'm against it from a Muslim perspective, or a Jewish perspective, or a Hindu perspective. You want to be a practicing Muslim? Awesome. Great. Have at it. We can discuss your salvation and your soul one-on-one in a very cordial environment if you'd like. But when it comes to trying to impose, which, let's face it, that's what Islam does. That's what the religion of peace has done throughout its entire existence. It's what's happening in Europe today. It's what apparently they're testing out to see if it can happen in New York today. Back to the article. Republican Rep. Randy Fine responded to Kizwani's post on X and made it clear that when given a choice between dogs and kowtowing to Islamic extremism, Americans' choice will be their beloved pets. And he's right. Democrats and the left decided this would be a good opportunity to cry genocide, racism, and Islamophobia. They are still demanding, it's been a week now, they're still demanding that Fine be censured and resign from Congress. This also is not going well. Fine has said, I double dog dare you. I don't know a whole lot. I'll admit, I don't follow Randy Fine. I never really took him into consideration very much as a representative, but I'm going to have to look into him, see what he's all about politically, at least. As my colleague Rusty Weiss so hilariously detailed, Fine has introduced the Protecting Puppies from Sharia Act, a bill designed to withhold federal funding from any state or local government that wants to ban dogs as pets. And they really should have different variations of that law. Because here's the thing, and again, this is not coming from a religious perspective. This is coming from an America First perspective, a freedom perspective, a constitutional perspective. You should be allowed in the United States of America to practice your religious beliefs any way you want, as long as it does not harm or interfere in an illegal manner with anyone else, family member or not. Neighbors, whatever, people that you work with. If your religion forces you to engage in activities that can be deemed illegal, then that's not allowed. Now you might say, well, it's not illegal to ban people from owning pets. There are other places, by the way. I've lived in areas where pets must be, they have certain criteria for how dogs can be walked, when they can be walked, and all that other stuff, right? But to ban them for the sake of a religious belief, that, my friends, is against the Constitution, because one religion cannot supersede another. Now you might say, again, Rucker, you're a Christian nationalist. How can you say this? I want Christianity to win by the merits of Christianity, by the merits of the Bible, by the merits and the influence of the Holy Spirit. I don't want anything from a human perspective, from a worldly perspective, I don't want anything to enhance, in other words, to force Christianity onto anyone, and I don't want it to prevent anyone from being able to practice or embrace Christianity. And that goes across the board for all religions. We have to be consistent. We've been blessed here in the United States of America with the ability to practice our faith. And part of that blessing is for others to practice their faith. And you might say, but that's bad if their faith is wrong. Well, not necessarily, because there will be people of other faiths wherever. And if we have an opportunity here to be able to talk to them, to show them the light, to spread the gospel, this is an amazing thing. We don't have to go on missionary trips to Central Africa in order to spread the gospel. We can just do it here within the boundaries of the law. And those boundaries are very minimal. But people like Zohran Mamdani and his allies are trying to supersede those boundaries. This is a perfect case of it. And I, for one, will not stand for it. It's more than just dogs, though, folks. Zohran Mamdani has really awakened the masses, not just Republicans and conservatives and patriots, but also many Democrats. And we'll get to their side here in a second. But I wanted to play this short video from somebody that I'd never heard of, just happened to cross my feed. I wasn't following her, but I do definitely agree with what she says here. She goes by RAQ, R-A-Q. Her Twitter handle is R-A-Q is right. So Rock, I don't know. Rock is right. There, we'll go with that. Rock is right is her Twitter handle. And she says it exactly how it should be said.
Are you a Democratic girly pop located in the middle of New York City? Did you vote for Zohran? Well, if so, you're a fucking idiot. Girl, what have you done? You guys make us all look so dumb. Like, honestly, there's no better way to say it. So what's happening? Let's do the update. So it's been a month and a half since Zohran took office in New York City. So Zohran has said that if Kathy Hochul does not raise taxes on the wealthiest people, which, by the way, she's blocking him from doing this because she doesn't want them to leave, and she needs their tax money. And the fact that Kathy Hochul is blocking Zohran from doing this really tells you all you need to know. Kathy is a Democrat, and Kathy's even like, girl, you can't do this. Anyway, so what's happening now? So Zohran has said that he's going to raise property taxes by 9.5%. if Kathy doesn't comply. So, if Kathy gives into this, it's appeasement. It's literally appeasement. You guys are saying like, oh, Trump is a terrorist. Trump is... Well, Zohran's like, if you don't do this, I'm going to raise taxes on the middle class. And then you know what happens, by the way? Your rent goes up. Yeah, it does. It means you'll never be able to afford a home. That's what that means. Anyways, so I hope you guys are enjoying it. I hope you guys are glad with what you voted for. And this is, like I said, like a month and a half in. Socialism is great in theory. I mean, that sounds great. Free stuff. Who wouldn't want free stuff? The problem is that doesn't work. It's a utopia. It doesn't work because rich people at the end of the day decide what happens. And if they're like, I'm going to go to Florida, Kathy's not going to give in. And like, honestly, Kathy, hold firm. Because this is what the liberal women needed. Anyways, hope you guys are happy. Okay, bye. Idiots.
Freeze drying again?
Never know what could happen.
Whatever the future may bring, dinner can be certain.
Visit patriot.tv/harvest today.
I'm sure the vast majority of you in my audience are not surprised that Zohran Mamdani is proving to be a total failure, just an absolute debacle as mayor of New York City. The only surprising part is how quickly the people of New York City are reacting. These are the people that, generally speaking, and I used to live in New York, generally speaking, they're not very fast at admitting mistakes. We'll put it like that. But they are. The buyer's remorse that's being expressed publicly right now in New York City is telling. And it's so bad that you will find a lot of people, even in the media, cannot ignore it. They are talking about it, and they are concerned. Here is one group. I tried my best to figure out who exactly these people were, what they represented, and all this stuff. But all I know, the best I could do is that these are middle class Democrats who are upset with Mamdani already talking about raising their taxes. Watch.
The mayor, with the greatest respects, in every campaign speech, in every debate where you engage, we opened our ears to listen. Now today, accept the words echoing from us now. Do your job as mayor and leave our taxes out of it.
Having only two options. You're saying if we don't tax the rich, then I got to increase property taxes. We are not a pawn in Southeast Queens. We are not part of your negotiation tactics. Zohran Mamdani, you are out your damn mind.
What's got them so riled up that they are out there organizing full-blown protests less than 2 full months after Mamdani was sworn in? Well, of course, he's not getting his way. He's not getting the wealth tax that he wants from the states, so he's going to take it out on the people. Why not, right? He's mayor. He's going to do what he was always planning on doing from the beginning.
What would rather do is ensure that they remain as they are so that the city can be on firm financial footing. However, in order to get to this point of closing the gap on both this fiscal year and the next fiscal year, we are forced to raid the rainy day fund, the retiree health benefits trust reserve, and to increase property taxes across these other years.
So let's stop and think about that. We're talking about New York City. So the average property tax across America, we'll use rough numbers. We'll say approximately $3,000 a year, right? Well, in New York, it's actually more than double that. It's over $6,000 a year on average for property taxes in New York State. But in New York City, it's actually almost double that. It's over $12,000 on average currently. Now, Mamdani wants to increase that. He wants to get more money from people, punish them for taking the American dream of home ownership and fulfilling that dream. Why is that the case? Why? Don't even get me started on the evil of property tax to begin with. Okay, we'll talk about that some other day. But for him to want to take property tax that's already so astronomically high and increase that even more to well over $1,000 per month for New Yorkers, most of whom are currently struggling just to keep up. Yeah, they always say that it's become a very tired cliche that, elections have consequences. I'm so sick of hearing it. Except I'm not, because it's true. Tariffs are the big news of the day, but they weren't the only news. There's plenty happening in the economy that we need to discuss. And to discuss that, we are bringing on my good friend, my longtime friend, and the guy that I turn to when I have any questions about the economy, about gold, about the stock market, about pretty much anything that has to do with money. Ira Brashatsky. He is the managing member and founder of Advisor Metals, and we are super blessed to have him joining us today. Ira, how are you doing? Let's start there, and then we'll get to the economy.
A lot going on, JD. So I'm happy to discuss it. ask away.
No, let's start with the tariffs. So they were struck down Friday morning by the Supreme Court, 6-3 decision. Lots of reactions, lots of things happening. Go ahead and break it down for us. What do you see as the current, the trajectory, and how it'll affect you and me and everybody listening?
The interesting part of it was you'd think it would be 6-3, all the conservatives and the liberals on the side, but actually it was a mix. You had 3 and 3 of each. You had 6 of the. You had three Democrats and 3 liberals and 3 conservatives making the six majority. I guess that's the best way to put it. So the broad-based tariffs, when I say broad-based, meaning that Trump could do whatever he wants, was shut down by the Supreme Court. But they did not say anything about the refunds. How do the refunds happen? And Brett Kavanaugh, in his rebuttal, his dissent, said, that's got to go down to the lower courts, and we're going to see what happens. So he does have the ability to do more, I'll call it individual country tariffs. I think Section 301, I think that's the number. But there's a few more hurdles to use that. So it'll be interesting to see about the refunds. And Schumer, of course, was all excited. This is great for the consumer. And a few days ago, the Kevin Hassett, I think his National Economic Council, said that the Fed in New York had their report that came out that said the tariffs went through to the consumer, and that's what the New York Fed said. And Kevin has said that's the worst report I've ever seen in all my years, he said. So it's kind of a, to use that trader expression, a mixed bag. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Well, mixed bags are always a challenge, regardless of which direction they're going. Always a challenge when it comes to individual finances. A lot of times the various markets respond, I wouldn't necessarily say against the news, but respond accordingly with the news. Now, we've seen the immediate reactions to this news coming through in the stock market, in Bitcoin, in gold, and in silver. But there were other factors when it comes to GDP and other reports that also dropped today that are being overshadowed by the tariffs. But why don't you bring us up to speed on what else has been happening this morning?
Sure. The GDP came in below expectations. I think it was 1.4% for the most recent quarter, and that wasn't too exciting. And then the PCE, which is one of my favorite, and it's the Fed's favorite inflation indicator. It's the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index. That came in showing a little bit more inflation. It was up 0.4% in December or in January, and it was up 3% year on year. And the Fed inflation target is 2%. So you have lower employment, because last Friday, the employment picture came out and not as many jobs were created. The unemployment rate was about the same. So you have a little more inflation, not so much jobs creation. And are we looking at stagflation from the 1970s? I was around then. I've got 46 years in the financial market. So I just remember those days. They weren't very, very pretty economically. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And gold went up. I looked at the charts, and I'm a chart analyst. I have been for over 3 decades. And from the early 70s, 71, when Bretton Woods was dismantled or they didn't use it anymore, till like 1980, 81, gold went up. It was like, a 45-degree angle, except in 1975, 76, it dropped for about a year for whatever reason, and then it went up. So gold went up strongly today as well. Silver went up strongly today as well. And to combine that with the chart analysis that I do, the powers that be, somebody knows something along the way, because this information came out Eastern time at 8:30 a.m. And at 7:58 a.m., silver with strong movement went above its 50-day moving average. It was below it for a little bit for the last few days, and it strongly went above it a half hour before this news came out. And it wasn't guessing. It wasn't like a few contracts. It was a lot of contracts that went through. And the 50-day moving average and the 200-day moving average are the ones I look at, and it's the ones the hedge funds and the big money look at. And when it goes above a technical indicator or below a technical indicator, that's where other technical indicators come in. That's where buy programs come in, sell programs, whatever. So when it went above that 50-day moving average, silver took off. I think it's up $3-4 already today.
Nice. Yeah. We have seen the rocky road that silver took. I know that very recently it shot up to record highs, and a lot of people were thinking, that's curious that it was shooting up so far so fast. Sort of corrected itself, obviously, and now it's down back to earth in a position where I think a lot of people are reacting, and we're seeing a lot of people getting into the silver market, getting into gold, buying physical precious metals. But you take a slightly different approach than the vast majority of gold companies, whether you're buying gold through cash or doing a rollover, a transfer of retirement accounts. You're not a fan of the collectibles, the numismatics. You look at the actual price of physical gold and silver, how it's priced based upon weight. Tell us a little bit about that and how Advisor Metals is very different from your average gold company.
Sure. I'll put on my sarcastic voice a little bit now. The other companies, when they talk to, their leads or potential customers, they go, you should get these numismatics. Yes, it costs you 30% more to get them, but when you sell them, you get 30% more. The customers, they're smart, they're thinking for a bit. Well, wait a minute, who gets the extra 30%? Well, we do, of course. We've got marketing expenses, we've got people, we've got all sorts of stuff. So that's why I specialize in bullion. By the weight, your basic bars and coins, whether it's a bar, whether it's a coin, whether it's a round, which is made by private mints, or a sovereign mint like the American Eagle, Maple Leaf, Krugerrand, etc. You're buying pretty much the weight. It's very easy to follow. You can look at the spot price. When the spot price goes up or down $1, you made $1 or didn't make $1. When you have a numismatic, it's that extra layer of supply and demand that's out of your control. When I say out of your control, I mean the spot price, of course, is market-based, but it's just another layer that you have to throw in the mix. And unless you're a collector, why? There's no reason to it.
Makes sense to me.
And to me.
So we have, obviously, you're an expert in gold and silver. We've seen a lot of movement with Bitcoin. It sort of crashed and really hasn't recovered. We've seen stock market hit record high, but a lot of people are saying that that's in many ways due to inflation. And of course, we've got the long-term markets out there. Considering what we've just seen, a lot of people, I know that Jonathan Turley's out there saying there's plenty of other ways that the president can engage in tariffs. A lot of experts are saying, hold your horses, don't get too freaked out. You got Mike Johnson out there saying that he and Congress are going to try to figure out something. I'm not sure what they can do without the full support of the entire Republican Party in both chambers. So that might just be empty. But walk us through what you're looking at. You said you're a charts guy. Walk us through what you're looking at as far as the rest of 2026 into 2027. Let's sort of take a long-term prognosis of the economy, not taking into account the midterm elections. We're going to get to that as a separate question, but walk us through just economic, geek out on us a bit about the future for the economy.
The economy is very, very good because with the big, beautiful bill from last summer, the tax rates were lowered, and people, April 15th is the tax deadline. Most people will file by then, and they're going to see their refunds are bigger than they have been in the past. In fact, I think there was a news story, a headline the other day that said the refunds were 10.9% higher than they were, I think, last year. So people are going to see extra money, and it's their money they're getting back. This isn't handouts from the government. This isn't pandemic era money that caused inflation. This is money that people are going to use. Either they're going to save or they're going to purchase with things, and that's going to keep the economy going.
Gold and silver are definitely hot right now. Now, before you go out and you buy a bunch of numismatics or collectible coins or whatever, do one of those gold IRAs, you should know the truth about physical precious metals. And if you are considering learning the truth, you are considering getting gold and silver, whether it's going to be through cash purchase or a rollover of your retirement account, the best place to do that is to go to jdrucker.com/gold, jdrucker.com/gold. That will just take you to advisorbullion.com when you can talk to my good friend Ira over there. He'll take care of you. With the aforementioned election coming up this year, what do you think? And I'm not asking you for price predictions. I know that you don't get into that, but the overall fiat economy system that we're in, how do things look for us if the Democrats are able to take control of the House or the Senate versus, or God forbid, both, or versus the Republicans retaining control on Capitol Hill? What favors, let's say, somebody like you or me or our listeners who are just out there, doing our thing, working day to day, and trying to make a living? How does that impact? How would the elections impact that?
Very, very much so, and most, if I would shout this: the Republicans have to show up at the polls in November. I mean, if we show up at the polls, then we'll be able to retain the House and Senate. But it's all lethargy, however it's pronounced, and that's what we saw in these special elections, and like with the governor races in Virginia and New Jersey. We've got to show up, and then we'll win. So if any one of those legislators, either the House or the Senate, goes Democrat, first, the Democrats are going to start doing their impeachment things. They're going to start being obstructionists, which is really what they know how to do. They don't really have any plan outside of being an obstructionist. So that's going to stop a lot of the agenda. Maybe Trump will have executive orders, but it's not going to be very good for the economy. It'll probably be good for the metals because of the uncertainty. So that's my election.
Well, that's funny because we're sitting here, and for those who don't know, Ira Brzezinski, the managing member of Advisor Metals, he is not your stereotypical gold guy that you see out there on a lot of these shows. He's not going to, and forgive me for using this phrase, he's not going to hedge his bets and be like, oh, the Democrats have some ideas and Republicans have some ideas. No, he's a conservative, and he's not shy about it. Tell us, you've been around in the political world for quite a while, not just the economic world. And as such, you have strong perspectives on the personalities behind it. Forget about the policies for a second. The personalities behind it, such as President Trump. We've seen some strong personalities on the left trying to rise up, like Gavin Newsom, and out here in California. Look forward, if you would, to the prospects. Who do you like? Okay, great. Trump is in there. He's doing what we want him to do. He's fighting against the uniparty swamp and trying to do everything he can to make America great again. But he's got, 2.5 more years? What happens afterwards? Who do you like in 2028? I know I'm putting you on the spot. We didn't discuss this ahead of time, but throw out some names. Who are you liking in the 2028 election for the Republican Party?
Vance and Rubio, however they do it. If Rubio's on top and Vance second, Vance on top, Rubio second, that's a formidable ticket that can't be beat. Those are my two favorites.
Yeah, they and both of them seem to be very much aligned with the continuation, because I believe that's what we're looking for. We don't want somebody to come in and shake up the Republican Party. That's already happening right now. We want somebody who's going to take that shake up and continue down the same basic path, perhaps with their own strengths adding to it. So I'm a big fan of both. It's funny because both of them have been on my enemies list in the past, and both of them have since fully redeemed themselves. So I like your picks there. One last question before we start, before we end, but I do want to allow you the opportunity to talk to us about Advisor Metals, to tell us how it got started. Take your time. I'll get to my last question, but go ahead and tell us about your company and tell us why people should reach out to you.
Well, as I mentioned, I've got 46 years of experience in the markets, and I was an institutional equities trader for over 3 decades. But 10 years ago, I got into metals and started my own shop 6 years ago because I saw what was out there, these 30, 40, 50% markups, which are just horrendous. And I'm registered with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. I have my Series 3 license. As far as I know, the only person in this retail physical precious metals business that has that, and I've had that since 1991. I've had it over 3 decades. And that old Hebrew National commercial, I have to answer to an even higher authority. So, if there's an issue or something, I know with these other firms, the customer, if they're aggrieved or whatever, goes to state attorney general, wherever they are. With me, they go right to the feds if anything happens. So the feds, they're going to jump on these things right away. But everything's wonderful. All I get is praise, and it's just great. So that's why I started it and how I approach my customers, and get, like I said, a lot of praise, a lot of referrals, and it's just wonderful. And as you mentioned early on, there are 2 ways to purchase physical precious metals. One's what we call the cash buy. That's where I only accept wired funds. So wired funds come in, we do the transaction. I work with a wholesaler like everybody else does, and then the metals are shipped out to you, usually by FedEx. If it's a small order, sometimes Postal Service. You get the tracking number, you get an itemized transaction summary from me, and I'm available to you can reach me after hours, which people like. Sometimes on a Saturday with these other firms, they're closed. I'm available. And so the other way, because there are two ways to purchase metals, the other is, as JD mentioned, you can roll over all or part of an eligible retirement account, such as an IRA, 403B, 401k, TSP. I do a lot of that kind of business, and that process is also relatively simple. You work with your current custodian, you set up a new custodian. I work with a couple of them, set up a self-directed IRA account. The metals are, the funds go from your current custodian to the new custodian, and then the metals are purchased, and then they have to be stored at a third-party depository by IRS rules. The custodians I work with 3 or 4 of them. It's all flat fee. I don't get any of that. It just goes to them, to the custodian and the depository. It's real easy. The depositories are insured for $1 billion by Lloyd's of London. And these depositories, JP Morgan stores metals there, and a bunch of others as well. So that's pretty much the outline of the process, and I'm available, for more detail, and glad to work with people.
Perfect. And people can reach out to you by going to advisorbullion.com. My last question for you, Ira, is this. We are obviously, you, me, vast majority of my audience, we do believe that things are heading in as good of a direction as they can, thanks to President Trump, thanks to some extent to the Republican control of Congress, though they are still, the congressional GOP is still feckless and seems to be unwilling to do what it takes to really make changes, but at least they're trying to get some things done, all right? But let's be real here. You and I and many others are still very concerned about the future, not just the financial future. I've been talking to people about stockpiling food. I've been talking to people about stockpiling ammunition. I've been talking, not me, I don't need any more. Got plenty. But people have been asking me about how things are looking, and is there number one, is there an exit ramp? Right? Like can we get off of this negative trajectory at any point in the future? And then number two, if we can't, if 2030, 2028, 2030, all these various milestones from the globalist elite cabal start actually happening, they asked me what I would recommend. Now I'm asking you this perspective, not necessarily as from an expertise perspective, because we already know what your expertise is in. But just a couple of guys talking, I'm asking you for advice. What are some things that you throw out to people if they ever ask you, hey, what else can I do? Should I move to Montana? Should I start a garden? Should I whatever? I don't know. Just throw us out some IRA survival tips for the future.
Well, do what you mentioned, as far as stockpiling those things. Definitely buy metals for diversification. Show up at the polls. The Republicans, you have to show up. Those are that was answering on-ramp and off-ramp. That's pretty much what I tell people. You really can't stand like the Californias that we're having difficulty with, you and I. Move to a low-tax state, and there are more states that are looking to eliminate their state income tax. I know Florida is, and there was another state looking to do that as well. So look to do that if you're able to move, and if you want to move. Me, I need to be near an ocean. So I'm kind of, not stuck in that way, but I'm limited as to where I can go. But really, you have to look at your own personal circumstances and see what works for you.
Nice. Ira Brashatsky from Advisor Metals. You can check him out and speak to him directly by going to advisorbullion.com. Ira, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, JD. Always a pleasure.
I do love talking to Ira. It's not just that he's knowledgeable, it's that he's direct and honest. There's a reason that I work with him and only him when it comes to physical precious metals. In the past, I've worked with multiple gold companies, okay? And I've always had challenges getting straight answers about numismatics, about markups, about this, that, or the other. Don't get me wrong. The companies that I've recommended before are, we'll call them the best of the bad. I don't know how else to put it. There were companies out there that had recruited me, and I just turned them away because they didn't do anything good. I was able to find a handful of companies, 3 or 4, over the last half decade that I thought were at least more honorable than the others. With IRA, with advisorbullion.com, it's not a question. I have no doubts. I mean, he is literally the guy that I would send my friends, my close friends, my family. He's the guy that I would go to if I ever get a batch of $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 that I could just go spend on gold and silver, 100,000, whatever, $1 million, doesn't matter. I don't think there's a limit. Then he is the guy that I would go to, even if people ask me about rolling over their retirement accounts, getting out of the regular markets before any future crash, getting into physical precious metals. Again, Ira's the guy. So go to advisorbullion.com, and reach out. He'll take incredible care of you.